The late summer sun was sinking behind the row of oak trees that bordered the quiet neighborhood in Brookstone Heights. The day was winding down, but for 12-year-old Eli Carter, it had only just begun. Eli was perched on the stoop of his family's modest home, a house that seemed to sigh with age but stood resilient, much like the people who lived within it. His elbows rested on his knees, his dark, curious eyes scanning the street as the golden hues of dusk bathed the asphalt. Eli's skin glowed warm under the sun's last rays, a rich chocolate tone his mother often called beautiful as mahogany. In his hand was a half-mended leash. He'd spent most of the afternoon repairing it, the faded fabric a relic of a time when his family had a dog of their own, a spirited mutt named Toby who'd passed away 2 winters ago. Toby had been his best friend, a partner in adventures and mischief. Without him, the days had grown a little quieter, a little lonelier. Still, Eli held onto the leash as if it tethered him to the memory. The evening air carried the distant sound of laughter from a barbecue 2 streets over. It was a good neighborhood, full of people who knew each other's names, who waved as they passed by. But not everyone fit into its fabric seamlessly. At the end of the block, a sleek black SUV rumbled slowly past the row of houses. Eli sat up straighter, watching. The car didn't belong to anyone he knew. It stopped briefly near the mailbox on the corner, then rolled on again, its windows tinted too dark to reveal who was inside. Eli wasn't sure why it gave him an odd feeling, but his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. A man, tall, broad-shouldered and wearing a tailored gray suit, was jogging down the sidewalk. His face, lined with concern, shone with a thin sheen of sweat despite the cooling air. "Excuse me, kid," the man called out, his deep voice strained with urgency. He came to a stop in front of Eli, bending over to catch his breath. "You didn't happen to see a dog around here, did you? A white Maltese, about yay high?" He gestured with his hand, indicating a small dog's size. Eli shook his head, but his curiosity was piqued. "No, sir. Did your dog run away?" The man straightened, his expensive cologne wafting faintly in the breeze. "Yeah, something like that. His name's Winston. He slipped out of my backyard when the gardener left the gate open." His voice softened, and his eyes darted down the street, a mix of worry and frustration crossing his face. "He's special to me. I don't know what I'll do if I don't find him." Eli noticed the man's hands trembling slightly, the way his polished shoes scuffed the pavement as he shifted his weight. It wasn't just any lost dog. This Winston meant something more. "I can help," Eli offered, standing up. He brushed off the seat of his shorts, ready to act. "I'm good at finding things." The man hesitated, his eyes scanning the boy. "You'd do that? For someone you don't even know?" Eli shrugged, a small grin tugging at his lips. "A dog's a dog. They deserve to get home safe, don't they?" The man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Daniel Prescott, handing Eli a card with his phone number. It was embossed with gold letters that read, D. Prescott Holdings. Eli tucked it into his pocket, nodding. "I'll start looking," Eli said, determination sharpening his tone. The next few hours stretched into an adventure. Eli scoured alleys, checked under porches, and even climbed a neighbor's fence to peer into their backyard. As the sky deepened to indigo, he spotted a flash of white fur near the park's edge. There, huddled under a bench, was Winston. His small frame trembled, his tiny nose sniffing the air cautiously. Eli crouched down, speaking in a soft, soothing voice. "Hey, buddy, you must be Winston. Your guy's looking everywhere for you." The dog's ears perked up, but he didn't move. Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out the corner of a granola bar he'd been saving. He broke off a piece and held it out. Winston crept closer, his delicate paws hesitant on the grass. After a moment, he sniffed the treat and took it, his tail wagging ever so slightly. With slow, careful movements, Eli slipped the repaired leash around Winston's neck and stood up. "Gotcha," he whispered, grinning. By the time Eli returned to the Prescott house, it was well past dinner. The SUV was parked in the driveway, its glossy surface reflecting the porch lights. Daniel answered the door almost immediately, his face lighting up with relief when he saw Winston in Eli's arms. "You found him!" Daniel exclaimed, his voice thick with gratitude. He reached for the dog, cradling him like a precious treasure. "I don't know how to thank you." Eli shrugged again, brushing off the praise. "It's what I'd want someone to do for me." But Daniel wasn't the kind of man to let such kindness go unrecognized. He watched the boy walk down the driveway and disappear into the night, his heart heavy with gratitude and a flicker of something else, an idea. The next morning broke with a quiet hum of life in Brookstone Heights. The Carter household stirred early, as it always did. Eli's mother, Rachel, was already bustling in the small kitchen, flipping pancakes while humming a gospel tune. The smell of sizzling butter and warm syrup wafted through the air, mingling with the soft morning sunlight streaming through the lace curtains. Eli, still groggy from the previous night's adventure, shuffled into the kitchen wearing a faded t-shirt and basketball shorts. His eyes were heavy, but his heart carried a lightness he hadn't felt in a while. Helping Mr. Prescott find Winston had been an adventure, but more than that, it felt good to be needed. "You were out late," Rachel said without looking up from the pan. "Didn't get into any trouble, did you?" "No, ma'am," Eli replied, stifling a yawn as he sat at the table. "I was helping someone find their dog, a little Maltese named Winston." Rachel turned, one hand on her hip, raising an eyebrow. "Someone's dog? And who might this someone be?" "Mr. Prescott," Eli said, picking at a stray thread on his shirt. "He lives in that big house a few blocks over, the one with the fancy gates." Rachel sighed, though her lips twitched with a hint of pride. "You've got a big heart, Elijah. Just make sure you're not running yourself ragged helping everyone but yourself." Eli grinned and reached for a pancake. "I'm fine, Ma. Really." As the two settled into breakfast, the sound of an engine outside interrupted their quiet moment. It wasn't the usual rumble of a neighbor's car or the distant hum of delivery trucks. It was deeper, smoother, a sound that commanded attention. Rachel peered out the window, her brow furrowing. "Who in the world?" Eli, curious, followed her gaze. His jaw dropped as he spotted a sleek black SUV parked in front of their house, the same one from the night before. The doors opened, and out stepped Daniel Prescott, dressed in a crisp blue shirt and slacks that looked freshly pressed. He carried a large box wrapped in shimmering silver paper, the kind you'd see in a high-end department store. "What is he doing here?" Rachel asked, her tone sharp with suspicion. Eli didn't have an answer. He wiped his hands on a napkin and hurried to the door, opening it just as Daniel reached the porch. "Good morning, Eli," Daniel said, his smile broad and genuine. He held the box out, balancing it carefully in both hands. "I wanted to stop by and thank you properly for finding Winston." Eli blinked, glancing at the gift. "You didn't have to do that, Mr. Prescott. I was happy to help." Daniel chuckled. "I figured you'd say that. But let me tell you something, kid. Kindness like yours is rare. You didn't just find my dog. You reminded me there are good people in this world." He paused, looking past Eli to where Rachel stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "Ma'am, I hope I'm not intruding." Rachel studied him for a moment before stepping aside, her expression softening. "Come in, Mr. Prescott. You're already here, so you might as well." Daniel stepped into the small living room, his polished shoes looking out of place on the well-worn rug. He handed the box to Eli, who hesitated before pulling at the ribbon. Inside was a brand-new tablet, the kind Eli had only seen in commercials, alongside a small envelope. Eli's eyes widened. I can't take this." "Yes, you can," Daniel said, his voice firm but kind. "I run a company, Eli. I meet a lot of people, and most of them wouldn't have gone out of their way to help me like you did. You didn't ask for anything in return. You just did what was right. That's rare, and it deserves to be recognized." Rachel, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. "Mr. Prescott, this is very generous, but we don't accept charity." Daniel turned to her, his expression earnest. "I understand, Mrs. Carter. This isn't charity. It's gratitude. Your son reminded me of something important, and I'd like to pay it forward." Eli opened the envelope and found a handwritten note. It read, "Eli, your heart is your greatest gift. Never lose it. If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me." Below the note was Daniel's personal number. For the next few days, the tablet became the talk of the neighborhood. Eli's friends gathered around to admire it, and his little sister, Amara, begged for turns playing games on it. But for Eli, the gift was secondary. What stayed with him was Daniel's words and the way he'd seemed genuinely moved. And then, life returned to normal, or so Eli thought. The following weekend, as Eli played basketball with his friends at the park, a familiar black SUV pulled up. This time, Daniel wasn't alone. A woman stepped out, a wiry, no-nonsense type with glasses perched on her nose and a clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as Janine, Daniel's assistant. "We have a proposal for you," she said, smiling warmly, but with a hint of professionalism. "A proposal?" Eli echoed, confused. Daniel stepped forward, his easy grin putting the boy at ease. "I've been thinking, Eli, you're a sharp kid with a good head on your shoulders. I could use someone like you to help me out with a project I've been working on." "What kind of project?" Eli asked, skeptical. Daniel crouched slightly, meeting Eli's gaze. "It's a mentorship program, something I've been meaning to start for a while. I want to help kids like you, kids with potential, kids who might not always get the opportunities they deserve. But to do that, I need someone to help me understand what works and what doesn't." Eli's friends exchanged wide-eyed glances, murmuring among themselves. Eli, however, remained focused on Daniel. "Why me?" Daniel straightened, his smile softening. "Because you showed me who you are when you had no reason to. And that's the kind of person I need in my corner." That night, Eli sat on the edge of his bed, turning Daniel's words over in his mind. He didn't fully understand what he was being asked to do, but he knew one thing. This wasn't just about him. It was bigger than that. And for the first time, Eli began to wonder if his small act of kindness might lead to something greater than he'd ever imagined. 2 weeks had passed since Eli accepted Daniel Prescott's invitation to be part of his mentorship program. The days since had been a whirlwind of activity: meetings at Daniel's sprawling estate, visits to local community centers, and brainstorming sessions with Janine, Daniel's efficient and ever-organized assistant. Eli, who had rarely ventured beyond his neighborhood, suddenly found himself navigating a world of opportunity and responsibility. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Eli sat in a conference room at one of Daniel's office buildings downtown. The room was larger than his entire living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the bustling city below. The table was covered with papers, markers, and a whiteboard scrawled with ideas. Around the table sat other kids, some younger, some older, who had also been invited to join the mentorship program. Daniel stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, his energy infectious. "All right, team. Today we're going to talk about what this program is really about. The goal isn't just to help you, it's to create something that helps the whole community. So tell me, what do you think kids around here need the most?" The room fell quiet. The other kids glanced at one another, hesitant to speak. Eli felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The confidence he'd felt just days ago seemed to evaporate under the weight of the moment. He stared at the markers in front of him, his thoughts swirling. Finally, a girl with braided hair and a sharp, no-nonsense tone spoke up. Maybe a tutoring center. Some of us don't get much help with school at home. A boy in a hoodie added, or a place to play sports. Not everyone's got money for the nice leagues. Eli's mind drifted back to his own neighborhood. How kids like him often found themselves wandering the streets after school, with nowhere to go and nothing to do. He thought of the empty lot behind the park, the one filled with weeds and broken glass. "What about a community hub?" Eli said suddenly, surprising even himself. All eyes turned to him. He swallowed and pushed forward. "Like a place where you can do everything. Study, play basketball, learn music, whatever. Somewhere safe." Daniel's face lit up, and he pointed at Eli. "Now we're talking. A hub. A one-stop shop for opportunities. What else?" Encouraged, Eli leaned in, his shyness fading. "We could have mentors, people who've been through stuff, to help kids figure things out. Like you're doing for us." Daniel nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Keep it coming." The room buzzed with energy as ideas flowed freely, and for the first time, Eli felt like he belonged. But as the meeting wrapped up, he couldn't shake the nagging thought in the back of his mind. How am I going to make any of this happen? The next day, Eli returned to his neighborhood with a notebook full of scribbled plans and a growing sense of doubt. As he walked past the corner store and the playground with its rusting swings, he noticed familiar faces, kids from school, his neighbors, even some younger kids playing tag in the street. He thought about how much work it would take to turn an idea into reality. What if he wasn't up to the task? What if he let Daniel down? Eli's thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling his name. He turned to see his best friend, Malik, jogging over with a basketball tucked under his arm. "Yo, where you been?" Malik asked, grinning. "Haven't seen you at the court in days." "Been busy," Eli said, forcing a smile. "Busy doing what?" Eli hesitated. He hadn't told Malik much about the mentorship program. Part of him worried Malik wouldn't understand. But as Malik stared at him expectantly, Eli sighed and said, "I'm working with this guy, Mr. Prescott. He's helping me, I don't know, figure stuff out. Like how to make things better around here." Malik's grin faded. "Better? What's that supposed to mean? You think we need saving or something?" Eli's heart sank. "No, man, it's not like that. It's just, I'm trying to help." Malik shrugged, dribbling the ball absently. "Help, huh? Just don't forget where you came from." The words stung more than Eli expected. He didn't say anything, as Malik turned and jogged back toward the court, leaving him alone on the sidewalk. That evening, Eli sat at the kitchen table with his notebook spread open in front of him. His mom was washing dishes, humming softly, while Amara played on the tablet nearby. The weight of Malik's words hung heavy on Eli's chest. "Something on your mind, Elijah?" Rachel asked, glancing over her shoulder. Eli hesitated, then nodded. "What if I'm trying to do something good, but people don't get it? What if they think I'm just showing off?" Rachel turned off the faucet and dried her hands, then sat down across from him. Her eyes, warm and wise, searched his face. "You can't control what other people think, baby. All you can do is stay true to yourself. If your heart's in the right place, the rest will follow." "But what if I fail?" Rachel reached over and placed a hand on his. "Then you get back up and try again. That's how we learn. That's how we grow." Eli nodded, her words sinking in. He flipped to a blank page in his notebook and began sketching a map of the community hub he'd envisioned. This time, he felt a spark of determination. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to quit. The following week, Eli presented his ideas to Daniel and Janine during another meeting. Daniel listened intently, his eyes never leaving Eli as he spoke. When Eli finished, Daniel leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've got vision, Eli," Daniel said. "But vision isn't enough. Now we need a plan. Are you ready to roll up your sleeves and make this happen?" Eli hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I'm ready." Daniel smiled, his confidence in the boy unwavering. "Good, because this is just the beginning." Eli's days became busier than ever. He met with city officials to discuss permits for the hub, worked with architects to design the space, and even organized a fundraiser to kickstart the project. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and at times discouraging, but it was also exhilarating. And through it all, Eli learned that real change didn't happen overnight. It took patience, perseverance, and the courage to keep going, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. By the end of the chapter, Eli stood in front of the empty lot behind the park, now cleared and ready for construction. He clutched a shovel in his hands, surrounded by a crowd of neighbors, friends, and even Malik, who had come to support him despite their earlier tension. As he dug the first hole, the crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, Eli felt the weight of possibility settle into his chest, not as a burden, but as a promise. He wasn't just a kid with a dream anymore. He was part of something bigger, and this was only the beginning. The lot behind the park had always been a place people avoided. Overgrown weeds and piles of debris made it an eyesore, a reminder of neglect in an otherwise close-knit neighborhood. But now it buzzed with energy. Volunteers swarmed the site, some wielding shovels, others carrying planks of wood or pushing wheelbarrows filled with gravel. The sun beat down mercilessly, but no one complained. There was too much excitement in the air. At the center of it all was Eli. Standing near a makeshift table that served as his planning station, Eli scanned the lot with a mixture of pride and nervousness. His notebook lay open, filled with sketches and lists. Next to it was a clipboard Janine had given him to keep track of tasks and volunteers. She had been clear about one thing. This was Eli's project, and he had to lead it. "Hey, Eli," Malik's voice called out, breaking his focus. Eli turned to see his friend walking toward him, a mischievous grin on his face. Malik held up 2 bottles of water. "Thought you might need one before you melt." "Thanks," Eli said, accepting the bottle. He twisted the cap off and took a long drink, the cool water easing his parched throat. Malik leaned against the table, looking out at the volunteers. "Man, I didn't think you'd actually pull this off. But look at this place. It's happening." Eli smiled, his earlier doubts easing. "I couldn't have done it without help. A lot of people believe in this, Malik. It's not just me." "Yeah, well, they believe in you too," Malik said, his tone softer. He hesitated before adding, "I know I gave you a hard time about all this. I guess I didn't want to lose my best friend to some rich guy's project. But I get it now. You're doing something good." Eli's chest tightened with gratitude. "You didn't lose me, man. You're part of this too." The two friends shared a grin before a loud voice interrupted them. "Eli, we need you over here." Eli turned to see one of the contractors waving him over. "I gotta go," he said, grabbing his clipboard. "Catch you later?" "Yeah," Malik replied, picking up a shovel. "But next time, you owe me a turn, as the boss." The day wore on, and by late afternoon, progress was evident. The lot was cleared, the foundation for the community hub was marked, and the first few beams were being set in place. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air, mingling with the chatter and laughter of volunteers. Daniel arrived mid-afternoon, his tailored shirt rolled up at the sleeves. He surveyed the site with a satisfied nod before making his way to Eli, who was reviewing the supply list with Janine. "This is impressive," Daniel said, clapping Eli on the shoulder. "You've got quite the operation going here." Eli grinned, though his face was streaked with sweat and dirt. "It's coming together, slowly, but it's happening." Daniel crouched beside the table, his tone serious. "You've taken on a lot of responsibility, Eli. How are you holding up?" Eli paused, considering the question. "It's harder than I thought it'd be," he admitted. "But I'm learning, and I've got people helping me." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's the key, knowing when to ask for help. A good leader doesn't do it all alone. Remember that." As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm orange glow over the site, the volunteers began to pack up for the day. Eli walked through the lot, thanking each person individually. By the time the last of the workers left, only a handful of people remained: Malik, Daniel, Janine, and a few others. The group gathered around a small cooler of cold drinks, their spirits high despite their exhaustion. "Day one in the books," Malik said, raising a soda can in a mock toast. "Here's to not breaking any bones." The group laughed, and Daniel raised his own drink. "Here's to Eli for having the guts to dream big and the heart to make it happen." Eli felt his cheeks flush as everyone cheered. He glanced at his mom, who had arrived just in time to see the day's progress. She stood near the edge of the lot, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of pride and emotion. After the group dispersed, Rachel approached Eli. "It's really happening," she said softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Yeah," Eli replied, looking around the lot. "It is." Rachel placed a hand on his cheek, her eyes glistening. "I'm proud of you, Elijah. I hope you know that." Eli smiled, a lump forming in his throat. "Thanks, Ma." Over the next few weeks, the project continued to take shape. Eli juggled school, meetings, and work at the site, often falling into bed exhausted but satisfied. Word of the community hub spread, and more volunteers joined the effort: neighbors, teachers, even local businesses offering donations. But not everything went smoothly. One afternoon, while reviewing the budget with Janine, Eli discovered they were short on funds for the gym equipment. He stared at the numbers, frustration knotting his stomach. "We'll figure it out," Janine said, her tone calm and reassuring. "It's not the first time a project hit a bump in the road." Eli rubbed his temples. "But it's my responsibility. I can't let everyone down." "You're not letting anyone down," Janine said firmly. "Challenges like this are part of the process. We adapt, we find solutions, and we move forward." Eli nodded, though the weight of the problem still pressed on him. That evening, he sat at his desk, brainstorming ways to raise more money. After hours of scribbling and crossing out ideas, he finally came up with a plan. The following weekend, Eli organized a community fundraiser, a block party complete with food, games, and live music. Malik's older brother DJ'd the event, and Rachel's famous peach cobbler became the highlight of the bake sale. The event was a massive success, drawing crowds from across the neighborhood. By the end of the day, they had raised enough money to cover the equipment and then some. As Eli counted the cash with Daniel and Janine, Malik slapped him on the back. "See? Told you you'd pull it off." Eli grinned, the exhaustion of the day melting away in the glow of accomplishment. "We pulled it off," he corrected. By the end of the chapter, the foundation of the community hub was complete, and the walls were beginning to rise. Eli stood in the middle of the site, watching as volunteers worked together to bring his dream to life. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine the finished building, a place where kids could learn, play, and grow, a place where they could feel safe and supported. And as he stood there, he realized something important. This wasn't just about a building. It was about the people, the community, the hope that things could always get better as long as they worked together. The skeleton of the community hub was finally taking shape. Wooden beams rose proudly, walls were being framed, and the buzz of drills and hammers filled the air daily. What had once been an overgrown lot now felt alive with possibility. For Eli, It was a dream materializing in real time, but progress was rarely a straight line. By one crisp autumn morning, Eli arrived at the site to find Daniel and Janine standing near the entrance, their faces tense. A group of men in construction vests stood nearby, arms crossed, their expressions grim. "What's going on?" Eli asked, his heart sinking as he approached. Daniel turned to him, sighing heavily. "We've hit a snag, Eli. The city inspector came by this morning. There's an issue with the permits for the gym structure." "What kind of issue?" Eli asked, panic creeping into his voice. Janine stepped in, her clipboard clutched tightly. "It's a zoning problem. The city's saying we can't build the gym here unless we file for a new permit, which could take weeks, maybe months." Eli's mind raced. The gym was supposed to be the heart of the hub, a space where kids could play and gather safely. Without it, the project felt incomplete. "But we've come so far," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stop now." "We're not stopping," Daniel said firmly. "This is just a detour. We'll figure it out." The workers began packing up their tools, and the site fell eerily silent. Eli stood in the middle of the lot, staring at the half-built structure, frustration bubbling inside him. How could one piece of paper derail something so important? Suando that evening, Eli sat at the kitchen table, the glow of his tablet illuminating his face as he researched zoning laws and city permits. Rachel watched from the stove, where she was stirring a pot of stew. "You've been quiet all night," she said gently. "Want to talk about it?" Eli shook his head, then paused. "It's just, this project means so much to everyone, and now it feels like it's slipping away." Rachel set down her spoon and sat across from him. "Elijah, nothing worth doing is ever easy. You've already done more than most people your age would even dream of. Don't let one setback make you forget how far you've come." "But what if we can't fix it?" Eli asked, his voice cracking. Rachel smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "You'll find a way. You always do." The next morning, Eli arrived at the site determined to take action. He gathered the core group of volunteers and explained the situation. While some looked disheartened, others nodded, their resolve strengthening. "Okay," Eli said, his voice steady. "If we can't build the gym right now, we'll focus on the rest of the hub. We've still got classrooms, the lounge, and the library to finish. We'll file the permit for the gym and figure it out as we go." Daniel, standing at the edge of the group, nodded with approval. "That's the spirit, Eli. Focus on what you can control." The volunteers got back to work, their energy renewed. Eli threw himself into the effort, helping wherever he was needed, carrying lumber, painting walls, even sweeping debris. He worked late into the evening, his determination unwavering. Weeks passed, and the hub continued to transform. The classrooms were painted in bright, welcoming colors, and donated furniture began to arrive. Local artists offered to create murals, filling the walls with vibrant depictions of community and hope. The setbacks with the gym still loomed, but Eli refused to let them overshadow the progress being made. One day, as Eli was unpacking books for the library, Malik appeared at the door with a basketball under his arm. "You're gonna wear yourself out, man," Malik said, leaning against the doorway. Eli laughed, brushing dust off his jeans. "Not a chance. There's too much to do." "Yeah, well, don't forget to breathe," Malik said. He held up the basketball. "Thought you might want a break. The guys are playing at the court." Eli hesitated, looking around at the unfinished room. "I can't. There's too much." "Eli," Malik interrupted, his tone serious. "You've been busting your butt for weeks. You deserve an hour to just be a kid." Eli sighed, then set down the book he was holding. "All right, just for a little while." That evening, under the dim glow of the streetlights, Eli felt the tension melt away as he dribbled the basketball across the cracked asphalt. The familiar rhythm of the game brought a sense of normalcy he hadn't realized he was missing. Malik passed him the ball, and Eli sank a perfect shot, grinning as the ball swished through the net. "Still got it," Malik said, clapping him on the back. Eli laughed, his spirits lifting. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to just enjoy the moment. The next day, Eli returned to the site with a renewed sense of purpose. He and Janine worked tirelessly to prepare the permit application for the gym, while Daniel reached out to his network for advice. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. One afternoon, as Eli was reviewing the final designs for the library, a man in a suit arrived at the site. He introduced himself as Mr. Gonzalez, the city inspector. "I heard about the work you're doing here," Mr. Gonzalez said, his voice warm. "It's impressive, especially for someone your age." Eli explained the situation with the gym, his words careful but passionate. Mr. Gonzalez listened intently, nodding as Eli spoke. "Well, Mr. Gonzalez said finally, I can't make any promises, but I'll do what I can to expedite the process. A project like this deserves support." Eli thanked him, hope flickering in his chest. As Mr. Gonzalez left, Daniel approached, clapping Eli on the shoulder. "See, you're making things happen," Daniel said, "one step at a time." By the end of the chapter, progress on the community hub was undeniable. The setbacks with the gym still lingered, but Eli had learned an important lesson. Resilience wasn't about avoiding obstacles. It was about facing them head-on and finding a way through. Standing in the nearly finished library, Eli ran his fingers over the spines of the books on the shelves. He could picture kids sitting here, reading, learning, and dreaming. The hub was becoming real, and no setback was going to stop him from finishing what he'd started. The first chilly winds of winter swept through Brookstone Heights as the community hub neared completion. With each passing day, the vision Eli had held onto for months came closer to reality. The classrooms were ready for desks, the lounge had been furnished with cozy chairs, and the library's shelves brimmed with donated books. The only missing piece was the gym. The permitting issue still hung over the project like a cloud. Despite Mr. Gonzalez's assurance that he'd expedite the process, bureaucracy moved at its own slow pace. But Eli had learned to focus on what could be done rather than what couldn't. One afternoon, Eli stood in the center of the main hall, holding a clipboard. Volunteers bustled around him, hanging curtains, painting trim, and arranging tables. Rachel and Amara arrived with a tray of homemade cookies for the workers, their presence bringing warmth to the hectic scene. "This place looks amazing," Rachel said, her eyes scanning the room. "You should be proud of yourself, Elijah." Eli smiled but didn't stop moving. "It's not done yet, Ma." "Maybe not, but it's already something special," Rachel said, squeezing his shoulder. "Don't forget to enjoy this moment." Amara tugged at Eli's sleeve. "Can I help?" Eli crouched to her level, grinning. "How about you help set up the reading corner in the library? Think you can handle that?" Amara nodded eagerly and ran off, clutching a stack of books. Rachel watched her go, then turned back to Eli. "She looks up to you, you know. She sees how hard you're working." Eli's smile faltered for a moment, the weight of responsibility pressing on him. "I just want to make sure it's worth it." Rachel leaned closer, her voice soft but firm. "It already is." That evening, Eli sat with Daniel and Janine in a quiet corner of the hub, reviewing plans for the grand opening event. The building was functional enough to host it, even without the gym. "We've got local businesses donating food, musicians lined up, and some of the teachers from the school are coming to check it out," Janine said, tapping her clipboard. "It's shaping up to be a big event." Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling at Eli. "What about you? Got any speeches ready?" Eli's eyes widened. Speeches? Of course, Daniel said, laughing. You're the heart of this project. People are going to want to hear from you. Eli shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't know what to say. Say what's in your heart, Janine said gently. That's all anyone wants to hear. The day of the grand opening dawned crisp and clear, with the first light of morning casting a golden glow over the hub. Volunteers arrived early to set up, while Eli paced nervously in the library, clutching a piece of paper filled with hastily scribbled notes. Relax, man, Malik said, leaning against the door frame. You've already done the hard part. This is just the victory lap. Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. What if I mess up? Malik snorted. You won't, but even if you do, nobody's gonna care. They're here because of you, Eli. Just be yourself. Eli smiled, Malik's words easing some of his nerves. Thanks, man. By midday, the hub was bustling with activity. Families wandered through the classrooms, kids explored the library, and a group of teens set up a makeshift basketball court outside to make up for the unfinished gym. Daniel stood near the entrance, shaking hands with visitors and beaming with pride. He spotted Eli across the room and waved him over. It's time, Daniel said, nodding toward the stage set up in the main hall. Eli's stomach flipped, but he nodded. He made his way to the stage, his heart pounding as the crowd quieted. Malik gave him a thumbs up from the back of the room, and Rachel smiled encouragingly, her hands resting on Amara's shoulders. Eli stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. He glanced at the paper in his hand, then back at the crowd. Taking a deep breath, he set the paper down and spoke from his heart. When we started this project, it felt like a crazy idea. I mean, who was I, a kid with a notebook, to think I could change anything? But then people started believing in it, believing in me. And that's when I realized something. Change doesn't happen because one person decides to do something big. It happens because a lot of people decide to do something together. This hub isn't about me, it's about all of us. It's about the kids who need a place to study or play, the families who need a safe space to gather, and the community that comes together to make it all possible. We still have work to do, like finishing the gym, but I know we'll get there. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that nothing can stop people who believe in each other. The room erupted into applause, and Eli felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. As he stepped down from the stage, Rachel pulled him into a tight hug, her eyes glistening with tears. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. As the event wound down, Eli wandered outside to the makeshift basketball court. Malik was shooting hoops with a group of younger kids, his laughter echoing across the lot. Eli joined in, the weight of the past months lifting for a moment as he played. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Mr. Gonzalez approaching, a folder in his hand. Eli jogged over, his heart racing. I've got good news, Mr. Gonzalez said, handing Eli the folder. The permit for the gym has been approved. You're all set to move forward. Eli stared at the folder, disbelief and joy flooding him. Are you serious? Mr. Gonzalez smiled. Absolutely. Congratulations, Eli. You earned this. That night, as Eli lay in bed, he replayed the day's events in his mind. The hub wasn't just a building anymore, it was a symbol of what could be achieved through determination, resilience, and the power of community. And as he drifted off to sleep, he knew this was only the beginning. Winter had arrived in Brookstone Heights, dusting the streets with a light frost and turning the breath of every passerby into a misty puff. The community hub stood proudly at the heart of the neighborhood, its vibrant murals and warm lighting a beacon of hope against the gray skies. The gym construction, now fully permitted, was underway, and excitement buzzed in the air as its completion drew near. Eli walked through the hub's halls, marveling at the transformation. The once empty lot was now alive with laughter and activity. Kids filled the library, flipping through books or working on school projects. In the classrooms, mentors guided teens through job applications and college prep. The lounge hummed with conversation as neighbors gathered to share stories and ideas. This was exactly what Eli had dreamed of, though the reality of it still felt surreal. One snowy afternoon, Eli was in the library organizing books when Daniel entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. He leaned against a nearby shelf, watching Eli work with a satisfied smile. "You know," Daniel began, "every great leader has a moment when they realize they've done something extraordinary. I think this is yours." Eli looked up, blushing slightly. "I didn't do it alone. You and Janine and everyone else made this happen." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "True, but it was your heart that brought everyone together. Don't sell yourself short, kid." Eli smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Thanks, Mr. Prescott." "Call me Daniel," he said, his tone warm. "You've earned it." The gym's grand opening was scheduled for mid-January, and the weeks leading up to it were a flurry of activity. Volunteers braved the cold to install basketball hoops, paint lines on the court, and set up exercise equipment. Donations from local businesses poured in, filling the gym with everything from yoga mats to boxing gloves. On the morning of the opening, Eli arrived early to oversee the final touches. He stood in the middle of the gleaming hardwood court, running his fingers over the clipboard that had become his constant companion. Rachel and Amara arrived shortly after, carrying a banner that read, "Brookstone Heights Community Hub Gymnasium, built by many for all." Malik helped them hang the banner above the entrance, pausing to admire their work. "Looks good, huh?" he said, nudging Eli with his elbow. "Better than good," Eli replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect." The grand opening drew an even larger crowd than the initial hub launch. Families, friends, and volunteers packed the gym, their excitement palpable. A local news crew was there to cover the event, shining a spotlight on the young boy who had inspired it all. Eli stood near the stage, nervously adjusting the microphone. When the room quieted, he took a deep breath and stepped forward, the eyes of his community on him. "When we started this journey, I didn't know if we'd ever get here. There were times I wanted to give up, times when it felt like the obstacles were too big. But every time I started to doubt, I'd look around and see all of you, working, helping, believing. And that's what kept me going. This gym isn't just a building. It's a promise that this community is stronger when we come together. A promise that every kid here has a place where they can feel safe, supported, and seen. We didn't just build a hub, we built hope, and I can't wait to see what we build next." The room erupted in applause, and Eli stepped back, overwhelmed but smiling. He spotted Rachel in the crowd, tears streaming down her face, and gave her a small wave. She waved back, mouthing the words, "I love you, Zhao." After the ceremony, the gym sprang to life. Kids lined up for basketball games, parents joined fitness classes, and teens explored the new equipment. Eli wandered through the bustling space, taking it all in. Everywhere he looked, there were smiles, laughter, and a sense of belonging. Malik jogged up, tossing Eli a basketball. "Think you've got time for a quick game?" Eli grinned, catching the ball. "Always." The two friends joined a pickup game, their laughter blending with the sounds of the court. For a moment, Eli let go of the responsibilities and pressures that had weighed on him for months. He was just a kid again, playing ball with his best friend in a place he had helped create. Chatur. As the evening wound down, Eli stood outside the gym, the cold air biting at his cheeks. Daniel joined him, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets. "You did it," Daniel said, his voice quiet but full of pride. "You made something incredible." Eli looked at the glowing windows of the hub, where people were still gathered, their voices carrying into the night. "We did it," he corrected, his smile widening. Daniel nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "What's next for you, Eli? Ever think about what you want to do when you grow up?" Eli considered the question for a moment. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, I want it to matter." "It will," Daniel said, his confidence unwavering, "because you've already proven you have what it takes." The hub continued to thrive in the years that followed, becoming a cornerstone of the community. Kids who had once felt overlooked found a sense of purpose within its walls. Families grew closer, neighbors became friends, and the spirit of Brookstone Heights grew stronger with every passing day. Eli's story spread beyond the neighborhood, inspiring others to start their own projects and invest in their communities. But for Eli, the greatest reward was seeing the smiles on the faces of the people he had worked so hard to help. And as he stood on the threshold of the gym that night, watching his community come alive, he knew this was only the beginning of his journey. The possibilities stretched out before him, endless and full of promise. For a kid with a big heart, anything was possible.